So good afternoon. My name is Dorothy Burridge, and I'm the Regional Education Coordinator with the Central East Stroke Network. And I'd like to welcome you to our webinar today, Vision and Stroke. This webinar is being recorded, and a link will be provided following today's session. I know some of you have asked if there is a handout. There isn't a handout, but as the recording will be available, you will certainly have an opportunity to have another look at it. You have been muted on entry, so I would encourage you to put your questions in the chat box, and there will be time at the end of the presentation to address those questions. Our presenter today is Dr. Chris Schell. He is a doctor of optometry in Ontario since 2003. He owns and operates a primary care practice and a specialty vision training clinic. He is a behavioral optometrist, which means he considers vision in relation to visual demands such as reading, computer use, learning to read and write, and ensure that vision is working easily and comfortably. He provides specialized visualized assessment and rehabilitation to patients with many visual difficulty, including those with acquired and traumatic brain injury. He is currently board certified in vision development and vision therapy and holds a fellowship status through the College of Optometrists in Vision Development. He is an active member through the Optometric Extension Program Foundation and Canadian Optometrists in Vision Therapy and Rehabilitation. And he states that when it comes to eyes, I have personal experience both as a patient and as a doctor. And I learned early in life that vision is a precious gift and cannot be taken for granted. And I'm truly passionate about vision therapy. Its power and possibilities are endless. So I will turn the presentation over to Dr. Schell.
Thank you, Dorothy, for introducing me to the group, and thank you for inviting me to speak to everyone today. So, yeah, as Dorothy was mentioning, I'm going to discuss the effects that stroke has on vision and ways we can help our patients. I'd like to start the talk with basic information on vision, how the stroke affects our vision, give some examples of what that might look like from a patient's perspective, ways we can help them, and the role that optometry and vision therapy play in the rehab team. I think if you asked a lot of people what is perfect vision, you'll get a fairly standard answer of 20/20. But 20/20 is excellent eyesight. It doesn't guarantee perfect functioning vision. 20/20 is the ability to see clearly small details at a certain distance, whereas vision is getting meaning out of what we're looking at. So a traditional eye chart that you see on the left it's used to measure that eyesight, to put a number on it. But to understand the symbols on the opposite side, the right side of the screen, you need to know their meaning. So seeing them clearly doesn't give us that information. I often tell patients eyesight and vision are like hearing and listening. And for those of us that have children or are married, you know what it means to say to someone, you heard me, but you're not listening. Another analogy would be you meet someone who's very tall, 6'8", and then if you assume that they are a great basketball player, that's probably incorrect. And that basing, height measurement alone and basketball skills, that's not correct. So 20/20 is one measurement, and if measured, we can't assume that equals great vision. So I'll leave this on the screen. Some of you have maybe seen this before. Depending how big your screen is or how close you are to the screen, we all might see different things. And this is a way to experience a difference between eyesight and vision. Hopefully your screen's in the images, it's clear, but what else might you see? I've heard descriptions of an X-ray, a winter scene, a map of some location. And most of us see that there's black and white patches clearly. However, hopefully this works, I add another piece of information, you may see the image of a cow. And once we're aware of that image, if I take away the circle, it's hard not to see it again. The cow is always there, but the circle makes it, draws our attention to that idea of vision. So really briefly, I was looking at some of the numbers in the area of stroke and vision, and it's predicted that as high as 1 in 3 stroke survivors will experience some form of vision loss. And then most of us that work in this area, that's probably not a surprising number to hear. And this is also a very debatable number. I think I saw as low as 50%, some as high as 90%, saying that of the information transmitted to our brain, it is visual. And it does vary, but everyone agrees that a major part of how our brains were designed, it involves the function of vision. There can be up to 1.7 million nerve fibers in each optic nerve, and then by comparison, about 30,000 in each auditory nerve. So, I sometimes say those numbers to patients, but just to illustrate that physically, structurally, and functionally, vision is quite a dominant sense. When vision is working well, it guides and leads. When it does not, it interferes. So in the optometry world, this is a quote that's often referenced, and I'll even bring it up with patients doing their assessments. I find it, it gives them some relief to know that many of their symptoms are because of a measurable problem. I don't believe anyone wants to have a problem or any type of problem, but knowing what is going on is not knowing what's going on is much more stressful for our patients. And most vision problems are hidden. There usually isn't any visible clues to families and friends that this person is struggling, only that their loved one isn't functioning well. So there are many different types of vision loss after a stroke. Control of eye movement is often very weak after a stroke, and this could be problems with tracking eyes across a page. They may experience double vision or shaky type vision. And if it is a shaking back and forth, a steady rhythmic shaking back and forth, we can call that nystagmus. Visual field loss is another common, and it can come in various forms and degrees. Hemianopia is the term for half the visual field gone. Quadranopia would be a quarter field loss. Can be in both or just in one eye. Visual neglect refers to the patient not being aware and not responding to things on one side of themselves or their world. Agnosia would be the inability to process sensory information. Visual agnosia, for example, would be not recognizing familiar faces or objects. Dry eyes are a common thing that, especially in today's world now, of staring at screens all the time. They can occur for anyone at any age. However, after a stroke, it actually can become much worse, especially if the eyelid muscles are damaged, which can reduce the blinking, and then that increases evaporation of our tears. The sensitivity of the corneal nerves can be lost after a stroke. With less sensitive nerves, there's no stimulus to produce the proper amount of tears, again, exaggerating these symptoms of dryness. If there are any pre-existing conditions, and especially in our older population, they may be cataracts, glaucoma, macular degeneration. The effects of that the stroke has, this just magnifies things. And lastly, there is a multitude of visual processing problems that can occur after a stroke. I will touch on some. It's probably a separate talk on its own to really dig deep into that area, but we'll see what we can get to. So as an example of what vision problems can look like for patients, skipping words, repeating lines, losing their place when reading, these indicate tracking problems. When we don't track effectively across the line when we read, we can end up reading some words backwards. Now, that's not the only reason for reading backwards, but that is sometimes a possibility. This idea is that our eyes jump to the end of the word, then the beginning, and our brain interprets this information in a different order than what is written. This could also be a sign of a type of a processing problem. It's not unusual for patients to complain about double vision. Seeing double means that the eye teaming or vergence, there can be convergence, which is crossing the eyes, and divergence, which is uncrossing. That control is lost or damaged from the stroke. And this also ties intimately with coordinating the vision between both eyes, is how we know where something is. An example of convergence control is following a moving object, such as a ball coming towards you. Reading involves both converging our eyes on the page and then tracking with those eyes along the line. Problems with either or both systems are extremely frustrating for our patients. Blur. So blur can be intermittent, it can be constant, it could be words going in and out of focus. Another very common symptom. The ability, so accommodation is the word that eye doctors use to describe this ability to zoom or focus our eyes quickly and accurately. And it depends on whether you're looking at something that's far away or close up. For example, watching TV and then looking down at the magazine involves changing focus of our eyes. Poor function of the zoom or the autofocus can lead to blur. Dryness is another source of blur. If any of us were to hold our eyes open for an extended period of time, the vision's going to blur. It may not cause any discomfort initially, but fluctuating blurry vision that gets better when someone blinks or rubs their eyes, that's a real strong indicator of a tear film problem, or what we often blanket term dry eye problems. So how can we help? This is something that we're all in the healthcare. This is something we all are always looking for more and new and fresh ideas on how to help our patients. Number one priority is things being medically sound, medically stable. And once that's been established, definitely would encourage a referral to an optometrist. All optometrists are expertly trained to diagnose ocular health and clarity problems. They will definitely be able to determine if there's any visual field loss, any optic nerve damage, and management ideas for any double vision. However, not all eye doctors provide visual rehabilitation. I would suggest that the patient or their caregiver ask the clinic, do they test for and treat brain injury related vision problems? If they do not, visiontherapycanada.com is an excellent resource to find clinics trained in providing these services. I just want to explain things there in a bit more detail. The image on the screen is it's a model of vision that was first shown to me after I had graduated. And the innermost section, the red section, is labeled physical integrity. And school did an extremely fantastic job of preparing me and my classmates for that area of vision. Eye health, the visual pathway, clarity need to be assessed before anything further can be done. And this is what all optometrists do every day. The next band, the orange section, labeled visual efficiency, is what I'm kind of attempting to cover with today's webinar. Optometrists with training in vision rehab dig a bit deeper. They look a little further into the function of the entire visual system and all its parts. This looks at 4 skill systems, if you will, of vision: fixation, following, fusion, and focus. These would be the clinics that I mentioned that would be found on that Canada Vision Therapy website. The next band, the green section, labeled Visual Information Processing, involves investigating things like spatial perception, eye-hand coordination, visual memory, and visualization abilities. This is also part of what vision therapy clinics specialize in. And the last section of this model, the blue section, these are the parts of life that, in order to be successful at them, we need all the other sections to be functioning at their optimal level. The better the underlying levels are, the better we are at life's activities. Okay, so let's take a look at ways to help patients with some of those tracking problems that I was mentioning can happen earlier. A typoscope. A typoscope can be made, it can be purchased. They definitely come in different widths and lengths. They basically isolate the line being read to eliminate confusion of multiple rows of text. A ruler can be used underneath the line being read in a similar fashion to a typoscope. Another great tip is to place your left hand or finger at the start of a section being read, then track along the line with your right finger until you reach the end of the line, and then bring the right finger back to touch the anchor, or the left hand, the left finger, which is already at the beginning of the section being read. This helps patients who are losing their place and skipping lines. Visual field loss. The visual pathway is unique and can be confusing. Information that is received by the right side of each retina is from the left visual field, which, depending on the color on your screen, it's more reddy, orange, burgundy color in the image. It then travels separately in the beginning, but after the chiasm near the center of our brain, the information joins together to travel to the right back section of our brain. The opposite occurs for the information that's received by the left side of each retina, the turquoise, green, blue pathway in this image. So what does that all mean? Well, a stroke on the right side of our brain often leads to loss of function of the left side of our bodies. It could be the whole left arm and left leg that is impaired, but it's not just the left side of the left arm or leg. Vision is different in that with a stroke on the right side of the brain, it can cause visual field loss that affects the left half of each eye, which is, by most people considering kind of weird, but it is very possible and fairly common. A powerful tool you can try yourself or prepare to show family members that you work with would be getting a simple pair of either sunglasses, inexpensive sunglasses, drugstore reading glasses, and push the lenses out of each side. Then take some black hockey tape, electrical tape, and cover up half, like the image on the screen, half of each of those lenses. And this would to mimic hemianopia, or a half field loss. Now, ask the person or try yourself to walk or to read with this physical barrier. The trick or the key is you've got to keep your eyes straight ahead to get the truest experience. If you move your eyes around, you will see more. So you've kind of got to keep your nose and your eyes straight ahead with those glasses on, but it's a pretty powerful demonstration. For patients that have this type of field loss and are aware of the loss, especially if it's actually their right visual field, so a left hemisphere stroke, One suggestion has been to try rotating the text that they're looking at, the magazine, their phone, tablet, and have them practice reading in an up-down direction. Now, it definitely takes a lot of time to get good at it, but with practice, it's amazing how efficient some patients can get. And not all languages are written or meant to be read left to right. So sometimes turning things on their side can have not an instant effect, but with practice, it's a really neat and simple technique. Here we have an example of a patient wearing a Peli prism. And I'm not sure how well everyone can see it, but there's actually two pieces of plastic stuck on the patient's left lens. And this is the Peli prism system. The central field of vision is actually tried to be left open. There's a prism above and below the center, and this allows the patient to look up or down to potentially see objects that are in their missing field. This takes a significant amount of practice and requires a lot of cognitive ability and coaching for our patients. Definitely cosmetically, it's got some major drawbacks. But as with a lot of tools, success depends on the type of patient you're working with, their motivation, and their ability to, try new things. And it definitely doesn't work for everyone, but it is certainly another neat tool in the toolbox. So what about visual neglect? Field loss and neglect do not always occur together. A continuum model has been suggested and at one end is field loss without neglect. In this case, the patient will be fully aware of their field loss. And then at the opposite end of the continuum is a patient with no definite field loss, but behaves with unawareness to their one side. Of course, there's the middle of the continuum, and these are patients with field loss and neglect. The patient is unaware of the actual physical field loss. Closer to the end of neglect only are patients that have a less sensitive side to their vision, but are not a definite loss. And they act with an unawareness to that side. Research states neglect is most often present if the right parietal part of the brain is involved. Spontaneous recovery can occur up to 6 months after the initial stroke. This neglect can occur in any of the 3 areas of space. Personal space is our body. When patients say things like, I feel unsteady, I'm not grounded, I'm out of sync with the world, they may have the personal space form of neglect. Next is peripersonal space. This type of neglect, family members or caregivers would notice as a patient who fails to apply makeup to one side of the face, shaves only one half of the face, misses food on one side of the plate, or fails to read one side of text. And lastly is extrapersonal space. Neglect where a person has a general unawareness and attention to one side of the external world. Frequent collisions with objects and people. They may talk about sudden popping up of things, of objects in the real world. When it comes to the help and the support for visual neglect, one of the number one things we can do is just bring attention and awareness of the problem to everyone involved. This will definitely help with, understanding and planning. Scanning training, which involves moving the head and eyes to scan around a new environment, can help create mental pictures and visual maps of that new area. There's a tool called yoked prisms, and they can be prescribed either as prescription eyewear or therapeutic training tools. And then there are several vision training exercises that may help. So on this slide, on the left, we have examples of therapeutic prism goggles. The picture on the right is a single prism. When an object is observed through a prism, it appears to then be in a new location. The base of a prism is the widest part, and light is bent towards that. The base is often used as the reference when describing the prism effect. So for this example, a base down prism shifts the image the person's looking at up. In therapy, prisms can be used to move objects from the loss or neglect field into the awareness field. Due to angular and linear effects, the greater the distance to an object, the larger the shift in location. So when using prism for extra personal space neglect, smaller amounts, maybe 6 to 10 units, are typically used and can actually be ground in or made as part of the glasses prescription themselves. For peripersonal space neglect, larger amounts in the 20 or more units of prism, and they'd strictly be used during therapy exercises and not typically worn on a full-time basis. We often see patients after stroke will have balance issues from either physical impairment, visual or vestibular problems, and this definitely will cause mobility issues. Glasses themselves can create some of those problems. I certainly recommend evaluating the patient walking and moving without any correction, whether it be, especially if they're in a bifocal. So there's the line bifocal where you can physically see it on the lens, and then there are progressive style lenses that don't have that. If the mobility, the walking around, and just general comfort is better without glasses, it probably should be recommended to their eye doctor about possibly prescribing single vision distance glasses, and then maybe single vision near, that will hopefully not necessarily replace their other glasses, but may aid in that recovery process and be safer for them. Double vision is probably the easiest problem to detect after a stroke, as the patient's likely to complain right away if it is happening. There are some key questions that we should ask patients when they, if they're experiencing double vision, and having this information just makes it easier when going to get things checked out. So, is it in one eye only, which would be a type of monocular double vision, or is it both eyes together? If they close one eye, it goes away, open the eye, it comes back, that's a binocular double vision. Knowing whether it's happening all the time or just once in a while, it's constant or intermittent. Is the double vision where objects are separated sideways, up and down? Maybe it's combination, diagonal. Knowing whether it's just at near, just at far, is it everywhere? These answers help determine a plan for treatment. And if possible, the patient writing those down, or their caregiver working with them to answer those questions, and then giving them to their eye doctor, it definitely is a key information to help with management. So what are some of the treatment options for double vision? After an assessment, an eye doctor could recommend prism be added to the glasses. If the separation of the eyes is about equal in all directions and present all the time, the prism can provide alignment for a patient and eliminate that double vision. Often in the beginning and for testing purposes, a stick-on type of prism, often called a Fresnel prism, can be used. The image on the slide is a Fresnel prism. It has physical ridges on one side and a smooth surface on the other. It can be easily removed from a person's glasses. If your patient has one and it falls off, it's important it be replaced on the same eye and at the same orientation. If the prism trial is successful or needs to be permanent, the amount of prism can be made into the lens itself, which is certainly a much more cosmetically acceptable and optically clearer, but more expensive option. An eye patch is an option for double vision. I've had patients where getting those two eyes to coordinate was just not going to happen. Now, sometimes only a small amount of patch is needed, and a simple small piece of Scotch tape in the center of the lens can relieve some of that double vision. The advantage of this is that the side vision from each eye is available and allows for some form of teaming in the periphery to take place. Often after a period of several months, the spot patch can be removed and the brain has developed internal software to maintain a sort of central suppression of that double vision and the use of peripheral from both eyes without still needing that physical tape on the glasses. So, vision therapy. Vision therapy is a customized training program designed to improve the function of the visual system. Vision therapy allows the patient the opportunity for new visual experiences with the use of lenses, prisms, filters, 3D activities, among other things. Vision therapy is individualized to the unique needs of the patient. It is safe, it's fun, but it can be very, very challenging. It often involves weekly one-on-one sessions with a vision therapist. Typically, these sessions are 60 minutes, 45 of active training, and then 15 minutes to go over with caregivers or the patient themselves some of the home support activities. Ideally, home practice exercises are done 15 to 20 minutes each day. The programs can range anywhere from 20 weeks at the lower end of things to possibly several years, depending on the severity of the problem. During vision therapy, we use therapeutic lenses, specialized equipment, computer programs to train the visual system, to train the brain. More recently, virtual reality is now becoming a useful tool in the therapy room. Vision training activities are designed to give both the patient and the therapist feedback on performance. The challenge is finding the appropriate lowest level to start and then increase the demand for the patient to improve their abilities. This is an example of a letter tracking sheet. The person is instructed to circle the letters of the alphabet in the correct order, A, B, C, D, E, F, G, as they track along left to right on each line. The sheet starts out blank and is timed. This sheet has been completed. We often instruct patients to draw a continuous line starting at the left edge and then circle up for the next letter when they find it. If an entire row is completed and no letters were circled, a mistake has been made. This is just one example of training the visual mechanics of reading without the comprehension demands of looking at actual words. The goal is to improve tracking skills with this activity. Eye stretches. Eye movement activities are a crucial part of restoring optimal visual function. Spontaneous improvement of motor function without actual movement is extremely rare and perhaps impossible. We were made to move, and so were our eyes. To improve eye movement, we have to practice moving our eyes. Think of it as eye yoga. It can be done many ways with many different demands. Basic eye movements would be looking left, right, up, and down, holding the position for 3 to 5 seconds. As comfort and performance improve, diagonal, rotations, more complex patterns at near and at far can be attempted. This is an example of something called a lifesaver card. They can come transparent or on a solid white card. The basic instruction is to hold the card at 20 inches from the person's own face in one hand. In the other hand, place a pen tip in the middle of any 2 circles against the card. Look at the pen tip. Bring the pen towards your nose. Slowly, 4 images will appear, and eventually a 3rd circle will float on the tip of that pen. This fused 3rd image will be a mix of the details from each of the real circles on the card. Getting this 3rd circle can take practice. Each line provides a different demand for the teaming and fusion ability of each eye. Moving the card up and down, sideways, and in a pattern while maintaining that 3rd floating circle increases the demands. An even harder challenge is to see the 3rd floating circle from all 4 rows at the same time. This is just a few examples how this activity can be used to train our eyes and brain to work together better. So just have a couple examples from patients that I've worked with. Their names aren't real, but their stories and their situations are varied. So the first gentleman, Joe, he was 70 years old at the time that I saw him. In November of 2010, he suffered a brainstem stroke, and this resulted in constant double vision when both eyes were open together. And on testing, he had no ability to converge, or what we call cross, his eyes. His eyes had nystagmus, that's the vibrating and shaking of each eye. Sorry, I was reading. I apologize. That was Joe. I'm going to go. Where's Joe? Here's Joe. We'll come back to the other gentleman. So for Joe, he has 2 pairs of glasses with identical prescriptions, and on one set, the right lens was completely taped over. On the other set, the left eye was completely taped over. So this is called a fogging, or a fog style of patching. It still allows light to enter the covered eye. It's more comfortable than wearing a black, pirate patch under the glasses. Cosmetically, it's definitely less noticeable, and it's a lot less tiring than having to close one eye all the time. So Joe's main concern was this double vision, and unfortunately, rehab and fixing it was just not going to be a possibility for his situation. I'm going to go back to, this is John, and John was younger than Joe. He was 56 years old. He'd had a stroke 6 months prior to my seeing him, and his complaint was wanting to be able to read his Bible again. This style of writing in a Bible is extremely, and he brought in his that he used, and very demanding, and small print, arranged in columns. And John just couldn't keep track. He kept losing his place. So we tested him, and there was a right visual field loss, but without neglect. So for Joe, yoked prism reading glasses made a huge, dramatic difference for John. In this image, each prism is oriented left for John. So we had ones made up oriented base right, which meant the words that were missing because of his right visual field loss were now optically moved to the left, over to the left, more into his normal side of seeing. Instantly, he was able to enjoy reading again. His glasses were only used for reading. He could not do other activities while wearing this type of correction. So I apologize for doing things in a weird order there. Okay. So in kind of trying to summarize some of what we reviewed and then leaving some time for some questions, I definitely would encourage everyone to reach out to a local eye clinic, an optometrist, for a general eye exam once our patients are medically safe and stable. Then, depending on, say, 3 months to 6 months post stroke, consider a vision therapy center assessment if there are still lingering visual symptoms. And Vision Therapy Canada is a fantastic organization with adding new and certified clinics frequently. It is. I would also, think it's great that if there is a vision therapy center in your area, going out, meeting them, seeing their facilities, seeing how they work. Some specialize in different areas, and it's probably a great way to build a relationship for that rehabilitation team. Vision therapy is a piece of the puzzle, and these people, as we all know, need a lot of support, a lot of therapy for everything that has been affected by their stroke. So yeah, I wanted to say thank you to everyone, and I think we have 15 minutes or so to answer any questions. So how can we do that, Dorothy?
That's correct. Thank you so much, Dr. Schell, for that very informative presentation, and thank you to the attendees for participating in today's webinar. We kindly ask that you complete the evaluation. The link and the QR code are in the chat and will also be in the follow-up email that you will receive. And this email will also have a link to the recording. So as mentioned, at this point, we'll open it up to questions and invite you to add your questions to the chat box. Okay, so I see a question here about is vision therapy covered by OHIP? And I would add to that, or is it available under private insurance plans?
Yeah, so unfortunately, no. OHIP, so the Ontario Health Insurance Plan, does not cover the vision therapy assessments or training. Motor vehicle accidents, if there's insurance involved, the auto insurance, there is definitely a process to submit for, and if approved, that does happen. Unfortunately, not always is it approved. Private insurance, again, it depends on the insurance plan. I've seen coverage. It's usually a very low amount, a couple $100. Certainly better than nothing, but it's maybe enough to cover one or two sessions. So yeah, unfortunately, the funding for the services is very expensive.
Okay, thank you. I have a few more questions. With patients who have double vision, what protocol do you recommend?
Well, answering those questions, I think I put it in there. And again, that slide's a great slide to have printed off, and knowing whether it's binocular or monocular, how long has it been there, and knowing how stable it is. So again, all optometrists should have a fair comfort level with managing double vision. The more complex and the more unique the double vision is, then that's where a vision therapy doctor would probably be more comfortable in trying to manage it. But all of my colleagues would definitely be able to do the diagnostics and then decide. Even they might be able to say, hey, we need to refer to another specialist, sometimes to an ophthalmologist. Surgical options can be pursued. We don't see surgery being a first line measure as much anymore, kind of like physio. Let's see if physio or vision training or prisms can help. And then if needed and it becomes permanent, surgery can be pursued.
So if you were patching for double vision, how long would you occlude each eye?
Typically, we like to alternate if it's a full patch, then we're gonna, it might be, for my one patient in my presentation, he would do one day of one eye, one day of the other eye, and that was an extreme situation where we couldn't get any fusion. Most of my patients, it's sort of, we monitor every 3 or 4 weeks. How is it going? Can we make the patch smaller? We start with a full size lens and maybe go down to smaller. At the end, it might be a dime, the size of a dime with a patch in the center. And then, every patient's unique, but close monitoring. So I would say every 3 or 4 weeks, you decide, is the patching, can we make it smaller? And then if they're going to do vision training, that's even better.
Okay, thank you. Next question, is vision therapy practiced only by optometrists, or can it be practiced by a rehab team after proper training?
Certainly there's some of the equipment we use is as you saw, there's cards with the circles, if you know how to use those, there's strings with beads, but most provinces, the use of lenses and prisms and light is a prescribed regulated act. So unfortunately, unless there's a optometrist supervising, individuals probably can't, do the same type of vision therapy that certified clinics can do.
Okay. Thank you. Another question here is asking if you could please speak more to the timing of vision therapy assessments and interventions for clients in the early and subacute stroke rehab phase. So that would be 0 to 12 months, who are experiencing significant blurred vision or visual field neglect. As a physio, visual impairments significantly impact our rehab goals and outcomes for mobility, especially early in rehab. And often I found we were told by neuro-ophthalmologists that they will just monitor for the first 6 to 12 months with minimal intervention, if any, or it takes greater than 6 months to get an appointment.
Yeah, and so, that to me is, we can't do everything all at once, but certainly within that, within the first month, if the person's got double vision the first day, that should be addressed in some form early on. We may not be doing the therapy side of things that first day after a stroke, but giving that patient some relief is so important to their recovery. So within 3 or 4 weeks of the event, the stroke, let's say, I think an optometrist might be much easier to get an appointment with, to at least do some preliminary ruling out of what's happening and what's going on. But then as far as the rehab, I have patients that, if things haven't improved by that 3-4 month mark, I'm very comfortable trying to start at their pace, at their level, and add things. So waiting a year, to me, would be not best for the patient in their recovery. So if within the first month they can get a general assessment to look for things, and then rehab and stuff starting at the 3 month mark would be probably an ideal situation.
Great, thank you. Another question, how to determine vision field loss versus neglect, or could a patient have both?
They definitely can have both. We often use automated equipment with lights that flash in the periphery, and they click a button to see if they saw it. And so that can give us a physical measurement, and we can actually put it into how many degrees of vision does that person have. Neglect, there are interviews with family, observation of the patient to watch them how they do things. There are some sort of forms where we ask them to put a line in the middle of we have a horizontal line, we ask them to divide it in half with a bunch of lines, and if we see they're shifting it one way or the other, then there may be some neglect. We ask them to circle things on a page. If they only circle the left side, they're neglecting the right. So there's definitely I think I talked about a continuum or a spectrum. At one end, the person only has a physical visual field loss and they're aware of it. At the other end, they actually have no visual field loss that's measurable, but they're neglecting half their world, and everyone else is somewhere in the middle.
Okay, another question. This one's about returning to driving, and do vision therapists address this?
In Ontario, the driving requirements are for acuity and what they call peripheral vision. You have to have 20 degrees of uninterrupted vision above and below the horizontal, and 120 degrees either side of center. So if the person meets those two visual requirements, they're considered visually legal to drive. Facilities like skill builders, I believe there's also driver certification programs. They look at the cognitive and reaction time abilities of people that are, hoping to drive. I have filled out and have patients who have waivers, and they have to do it every year and measure their fields, and they do their tests. And if they can show that they can function, given they've got that field loss, they are able to maintain their license. Unfortunately, if the acuity is less than 20/50, so 20/60 or higher acuity, there's no waiver or program. But with visual field loss and the right channels and programs, a person can maintain their license.
Okay, thank you. Does a patient need referral from an optometrist to programs in Vision Therapy Canada?
No, patients can reach out on their own. Every clinic works a little bit differently, but in general, in my practice, I have other colleagues that refer their patients to me, and then they've done a number of tests, so that helps with the management and planning. I have some that they've found us online, and they reach out, and we set up an appointment. If we need information from their previous eye exams, we have forms that we can ask for that information, what their last glasses were, and did they ever have glaucoma or other medical conditions for their eyes. But no, long answer to the question is, it doesn't have to be a doctor's referral for a patient to be seen at most vision therapy clinics. I believe patients can reach out, on their own.
Okay, this next question is from an SLP. What types of challenges have you come across when assessing people with a stroke who may have expressive or receptive language difficulties? Has language impairment ever prevented you from assessing or working with the client? And if so, do you have any specific means to compensate for this?
So that's a great question. Yeah, certainly being able to communicate and understand what I'm saying or my staff is saying, and then them getting back 10% barriers, and sometimes even handwriting it down isn't going to help if they're having visual problems. So every assessment is unique and customized. What I love about my job is sometimes thinking outside the box, and trying to come up with ways. We can't run every test on every patient, nor do we need to. We try to we test based on the problems. If somehow the person can communicate to me they have double vision, then I'll have to figure out ways to help them. And it certainly limits what we can do, but I like the challenge, and we've worked with patients young and old with all kinds of different conditions and abilities, and I think so far, we can't help everyone all the time, but we usually have something that we can do and provide, but they may not, because of their limitations, they may not be able to continue with our programs, or we can try to refer to someone else. I have a great team of resources. We say, have a patient with these abilities or these deficiencies. Is there anyone here that's more comfortable seeing them, or can you tell me how to learn from them? So yeah, I think it's about not being on your own when you're dealing with more complex situations. Hope that answers the question.
Thank you. There's a question here about light sensitivity, and do you work with clients who experience this?
Yes, in terms of any type of brain injury, light sensitivity is, 90% start out very, very light sensitive. Some of them remain that way. So we work with a variety of different tints and colors, and sometimes taping, to block light, kind of like adding blinds to your windows. We try probably a whole other talk. It's called syntonics, which is the application of light to try to maybe calm the visual system down with different colors of light. Sometimes the color is so well received they wear it as their lenses, and sometimes it's just a treatment. So yes, definitely light sensitivity. Arguably, anyone with extreme light sensitivity probably has some form of mild concussion, head injury, brain injury in their history. Dry eyes have light sensitivity as well. So yeah, light sensitivity is it's like a headache. Do you ever see someone with a headache? What's the treatment? So light sensitivity is tough, but there are lots of options to try.
Okay, thank you. The next question is regarding prices. So are prices for therapy generally the same, or do they vary from clinic to clinic? And how much can a person expect to pay for a therapy session?
Yeah, I think definitely downtown Toronto, where they're paying $100 a square foot for space, is going to have a higher, I'm in Barrie. Our rates are, over the years, we've been anywhere between $100 to $150 per hour session. Assessments start probably in the $200 range, and depending on symptoms and tests, we might get into the $500-600 range. And I would think most clinics are around that same amount. There wouldn't be too many that would be less than $100 per session, and there might be some that are in the $200 range for a training session, including equipment and stuff that gets sent home, and trial lenses and other things like that.
Okay, thank you. We have a question here from an individual who's asking why they are seeing unlevel grounds.
Unlevel?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. The two eyes are separate cameras, and if one sees the world higher than the other, then that's going to potentially be unlevel. Sometimes our ears give us a sense of what's straight and what's not, and the systems work together. Our proprioception, our vision, and our vestibular, and any one or all of them can be out, and that will give you that unlevel appearance of the ground. Sometimes with prisms, we can, not only does it shift the ground, it can actually rotate what the person sees, so we can maybe level it out, sometimes as a cure, if you will, and sometimes we over rotate it so that the ground now looks unlevel the other way, and use that to try to rehab. So you can use it both as a crutch and then sometimes as a tool to maybe push the system out of sync, and then hopefully when you take off that tool, it resets itself. So definitely the eyes can cause the ground to look unlevel because of the depth perception that our eyes provide to the rest of the body.
Thank you. I don't see any more questions. I'll just remind anyone, if they do have an outstanding question, please feel free to add it to the chat. And just a reminder, if you haven't done so already, to please complete the evaluation. That's listed at the link there in the chat or via the QR code.
I wanted to mention, Dorothy, I don't know if the participants have access, but my email, you can, the one that I share with you, if you want to give that email if someone has a question, I can't always say I'll respond the same day, but definitely I read all my emails. So you could share that email with the group.
Okay, thank you, and we will. And there's one more question that's come in. Is there a formal certification process to become a vision therapist? And then where can one access these programs?
Yeah, so the Vision Therapy Canada website has great information on that. They have their own certification program. So I have 3 therapists that have graduated their certification program. On my own, I went and got my fellowship through a group out of the US that does a lot of the vision training. So all optometrists are, once they're licensed, they have the ability to do basic analysis of the binocular vision system and do certain things. But there are colleagues like myself that have just, have a passion for this stuff and want to learn even more and take more courses and more training and more certifications. I think it is a benefit to the patient, but if a patient went to 10 different certified vision therapy clinics, they'd probably get 10 different experiences and learn from each one. So it is a unique area where there's There's always a lot to learn, and there's always a lot of new things coming out. I would encourage people or clients that are looking for vision therapy to reach out to that website, because in Canada, this is the best resource for trusted, certified providers. And there's information there on the courses and how it works. Doctors and therapists can take the courses, and no, it's great, a great resource.
Well, thank you so much. And that brings us to 1 o'clock. So thank you, Dr. Schell, and thank you to participants for your great questions. It's been a very informative presentation, and we're getting lots of sort of thanks and thumbs up and whatnot in the chat. So at this point, I'll just say goodbye to all, and enjoy the rest of your day.
Have a great day.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye-bye.